you are listening to the new WCEG Network on WCEGTalkRadio.com. You can click on live stream tab and listen to us, or you can even watch on your smart TV. We're now on YouTube at WCEG Network. I am Rev Diane Dougherty, and the show is called Take a Stand, and we will be on for the next hour with a very delightful guest. We are the worldwide community empowerment group where we speak life into our community. You can like us on Facebook. You can subscribe and encourage your network to do the same on our YouTube link. And you can follow us on Twitter or on Instagram at WCEG Talk Radio _ Let me do that one again. At WCEG _talk _radio and at WCEG Network. This is a disclaimer that the topics and opinions of all talk show hosts are their own and their guests and are not WCEG Network. Thank you for your continued support, and let's begin. My guest today is Lisa Cottrell, and she is an activist in my own town of Avondale. We met each other through some activism that we were doing. Actually, she coordinated it at AARJ, which is the Avondale Alliance for Racial Justice. I'm very impressed with Lisa's work and the work of her community. I'm very interested in activism myself, and I always begin by asking my guests, what was the cognitive dissonance that began your journey to begin or to start this organization? So with no further ado, I would like you to introduce Lisa. Lisa, welcome.
Hi, thank you.
So what cognitive dissonance brought you to a point where you and others organized the Avondale Alliance for Racial Justice?
Right. So I think the cognitive dissonance was my partner, Carol Calvert. My partner, Carol Calvert, and I have both been longtime activists in a lot of different areas. But when we had the latest, last spring and summer, brutal murders of African Americans at the hands of police, I'm being told I'm not loud enough, so I'm going to try to be louder and move it closer to me. Okay, can you hear me now? So when we had Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, and George Floyd being murdered, you know, Carol and I had already been involved in Black Lives Matter protests. And we went to some downtown, but we were very cautious because we're older and it's during the pandemic. So we were very nervous at first about going to some of the demonstrations, but we would wear our masks and kind of be on the edge of the crowd. And then Carol said, I saw they're having one in Tucker. Let's have one in Avondale Estates where we live. And so she put it out on Nextdoor. Sarah Galatioto Ruff immediately responded that she wanted to help coordinate it. And they put it out on Nextdoor and got it picked up by Decatorish and a little bit on Facebook. And that was 3 days later. 800 people showed up socially distanced and masked on the streets of Avondale and to support Black Lives Matter and to just say we've got to do something to change. And Decatur's also showed up and covered it and took pictures and whatnot. And that's when I said to Carol, wow, 800 people, we've got to organize. So I made up the name on the spot and told the caterers that we were the Avondale Alliance for Racial Justice.
There you go.
And I'm like, 800 people showing up. Avondale's only 3,100 people, roughly, So it's a pretty small city. And I'm not saying all those people were from Avondale. I'm sure some might have been from Decatur and whatnot. But, it just seemed like it was another level of people saying this just cannot keep continuing. And of course, we have a 400-year history of racial brutality in this country, but now that we can get it on cell phones, it makes it really visible, and I think that shocks a lot of people. And so it was really different to do something where we live, so then we immediately started inviting people to join and to become members, and we invited people that wanted to be leaders to step up, and that's when Nisheena Smith stepped up, and some other people. We've had some leadership kind of come and go since then because life happens, people get ill or busy or go back to school or have children or whatever. So, but we currently have about 6 leaders, Carol, Nisheena Smith, Candace McKinley is a relatively newer leader, Sarah Galitioto Ruff, Connie Bryans, who's a longtime member of Avondale, and myself. And we've got 2 African American leaders and 4 white leaders. And, considering the racial makeup of Avondale being about 80%, 80 to 85% white, probably 85% white, that's not a bad mix, but we invite more people of color that want to participate to join us. Our membership is probably about 600 people now.
Wow.
Yeah.
Timely. What I appreciate about you and about people like you and me is that all our lives we've been kind of going along, enjoying the life that has been put on a platter in front of us, not cognizant, absolutely not cognizant, and believing that everybody has that same privilege. Living in the South has been a real wake-up call to me institutionally, because I have been at the cusp of understanding who's allowed in and who's allowed out. Also in forms of governance and through corporate headship. And my cognitive dissonance has come as my life has intersected with those 3 entities, and I have been driven down a peg and then another peg and another peg. First, because I'm older, and secondly, because I have too much education and I open my mouth. Because if you speak up in those circles and demand a place at the table, you're easily dismissed in a right to work state. Mm-hmm. So to see the people of this community rise up and to hear from your heart that you just had to do something, to understand that social media is it could be a nemesis, because many people are drawn to it in a negative way. But what you've shown me, and especially the people in this city, is that it can be used to bring out the best of what our real feelings are. And so I can't thank you enough.
No, thank you.
I know when we were talking, I planned on having you on with our last guests, Martha Shockley and Bruce Johnson, and we were talking about what pushed them to participate in their activism, what got them cognitively dissonant and pushed them over the edge. But once you were talking, there was just so much richness in what you had to say, and also the involvement that you just jumped up and started, all of you. Like you're the nexus to create a movement that's rising. You brought the tide to where it needs to be in our city.
Well,
So
I want to give a lot of credit though to Carol for saying let's do it in Avondale, and then for all kinds of people for jumping up and
yes,
making that call. And
yes, I was responding to the collective you,
yes,
to the AARJ, and there's going to be more to come, because the tribe is ready to move, and you all jumped up and brought us to where we needed to be. Now, tell us a little bit about some of the things that you have done. I know you talked to me about the issues that we were facing in Avondale with the police, and at that workshop, I was at the first and the second protests that we had downtown. And I noticed that the police were sitting there and they were leading and guiding and allowing us to come and go. And they were very solicitous to all of us as protesters. But that isn't true of people that bypass downtown Avondale. And you all got together and addressed that as an issue. Explain to the listeners what the problem was and how you addressed it collectively.
yes. Well, before I directly answer that question, I want to say that the AARJ, when we started, was really provoked in a lot of ways by police brutality, but we see ourselves as addressing the roots of white supremacy on a number of levels, including community education and white people educating themselves about how to be anti-racist and how to, dismantle those structures and how to dismantle all of the stereotypical, unconscious, implicit bias and all of that stuff, which is an ongoing process. And, to learn from black authors and that sort of thing. And at the same time, to listen to our brothers and sisters. And so I want to come back to that, what we've done on some educational fronts, but we're trying to look at education, community activism and organizing, and then more kind of the political policing legislative parts. So the policing part, when we first started, we didn't know. We were like, I don't know what's going on in Avondale, but it better not be like these other cities. We don't want that to happen here. We don't want that to be the case. And we want to start looking at what is going on. And one of the things that we discovered, which is not uncommon for many small cities in the South, particularly, I would imagine, but probably all over the country, they have a state highway that goes through them and they make a lot of money off of the state highway. Well, we found it problematic that Avondale is 85% white and our ticketing is 80%, well, 75% black and 5% other people of color. Now, the city does not really particularly think that's a problem because the mass amount, there's literally, they tell us, hundreds of thousands of people travel through Avondale a day, whereas Avondale's only like 3,000 people, right? So it makes sense that the neighborhoods surrounding us are more people of color that they would have more tickets. But we still felt like, especially given the socioeconomics, that it's a little it's a negatively impactful on our neighbors. And so we're not saying just let people speed through town, but we were trying to look at both the financial impact and the um, cultural view, the impact of, we have a diverse police force, but I think the history of the policing was kind of a sundown town, keeping black people out back in the day when there was segregation. So a lot of people avoid Avondale Estates because it still has that reputation. So we're not experts in policing. So what we proposed was, we want the city to adopt community policing guidelines, 21st century policing guidelines that were developed by the Obama administration, and look more at like solving police problems more than just an arrest kind of viewpoint. For example, I talked to the police chief in LaGrange, Georgia, who was on that commission for 21st century policing. He's like, when people have a broken tail light, we got tired of just giving them tickets. So we went to the auto places and said, how about you give us discount coupons? And when they have a broken tail light, we'll give them a coupon. They can come to you and get their tail light replaced for cheap. And then if they do it again, we'll give them a ticket. Well, to me, that's community policing. That's really trying to solve the problem. And I'm not saying that we have all the answers, but I just like that viewpoint, right? Of
Right.
not a kind of us and them thing. And so we did come up with a solution with Avondale that we felt good about, because there seemed to be, I'm calling it a speed trap, but it's really a place that was the school zone that a lot of people were speeding through, but we felt there wasn't adequate signage. If you really want to solve the problem, try to get adequate signage. So we went through our representative, Carla Drenner, who went to the DOJ, which Avondale had gone to the DOJ too, complaining about this, but trying to get it moving to get better signage, so that people aren't just all of a sudden, the speed limit drops 10 miles an hour, right? Because we don't want children to get run over. Of course, they're not in school right now, but so finally, they're working on that, but they also agreed that they would get so there was no bias. They would have a camera that was only operating during school hours, so that if people were speeding, and they had to be going 11 miles over the speed limit. So it couldn't be, I'm picking you out because you're black, I'm picking you out because you're white, or I'm ignoring you, because you're white. So the city did work on that with us and agreed to do that. It's not yet been implemented because in government, these things take a long time. But we thought that was a win. And the city, the mayor and the board of mayors and commissioners, we also asked them to bring in a third-party consultant that had experience in racism, anti-racism, as well as policing. So they found 2 different consultants and interviewed them. And we really particularly preferred this one consultant because he's a black man that teaches racism in policing, as well as he has worked in internal affairs and all that sort of thing, because they know how policing should be done. We don't. And I'm not saying we totally agree with, we know about the history of policing in this country. We know about the problems in policing, but we thought that would be a good first step, just to look at what is the actual impact, and to do we're proposing doing listening communities with the surrounding areas, and also looking at the people that are impacted and trying to come up with some solutions. So the city was ready to do that, but then they decided they were in the process of getting certified at the state level police certification, and they wanted to do that first. So they're getting ready, I think, to complete that. So we want to bring the pressure again for them to hire that consultant and get that work done. And we had a petition that over 900 people signed agreeing that they wanted the city to do that.
Just amazing. That's just amazing. And without Avondale Alliance for Racial Justice, that wouldn't have happened. Or it might have happened a long time in the future, but because you stepped forward, I think that's the thing, is y'all stepped forward. We have a vehicle that wasn't there. It's like something that was missing is now a structure that is in place, but it's not a rigid structure. It's a fluid structure. And it sounds like the police and all of the representatives are amenable to listening to what the issues are and finding alternative solutions. Am I right?
We've definitely we've gone to many of the board of mayor and commissioners meetings and spoken up, and we've had some individual emails and conversations with them as well as with the city managers. We've only had, I think, one conversation with the police chief because we kind of felt like we really would rather that be left to the consultant, but
Yes.
I do think they want to find solutions.
I love it. I have done some study on the issues of governance, and one of the big issues for me has to do with the absence of voices and the structures that are not present within communities to hold the voice of the people as governance moves on. So you have like a 1% at the top, and then everybody else at the wherever they are. But there's no way to get your concerns up to the top. You can call, but oftentimes those calls are seen as just you can be put on hold. But when you have a group, when you have a large group that's speaking with a common voice and a collective idea, everybody gets better. So thanks. I'm also very aware of the art show that you had. And I'm look at her smiling. I'm going to be putting, because she told me I could use that art on the Take a Stand site when the link is provided, to show some of that art. Whose idea was it?
Well, it was Candace McKinley, who is an attorney and she works for the Board of Education.
Ah,
We knew we wanted to do something for Black History Month, and she had seen that I think it was DeKalb Watershed was having an art contest, and she's like, "Why don't we have one?" And we were like, "Oh, that's a great idea," because the other piece of what we're trying to do is improve the lives of people of color, lift up their voices, their history, and so it was perfect, and a lot more fun than trying to do a slow political police process. So we came up with that we would do ages 5 to 25. We would have an art contest between people ages 5 to 25, and they could either live in Avondale or go to one of the schools in the surrounding area that's adjacent to Avondale. It was our first time, so we didn't really feel equipped to like necessarily open it to the whole county because there's only so many of us doing the work. But and I forgot to mention Shelton Davis is a biracial man that's also on our leadership that does our wonderful web page. So shout out to Shelton.
yeah, it's beautiful. I'll leave that link on also so everyone can look up the webpage.
Yeah, so I'm going to just say our webpage is aa-rj.org. So you got to put the dash in there. But you can see on there, like, I think we have like 55 submissions, which wasn't bad since we didn't dream this up till mid-January. And we reached out to the art teachers in some of the schools and things like that. And so we had a group of prizes for young elementary, older elementary, middle, high school, and young adult. And we raised over $1,200 to give them prizes. So I think they were really pleasantly surprised. And the art was so inspiring.
It is exceptional.
It was just wonderful. We came up with the theme of, I'm trying to multitask here because she wants me to put in chat our webpage. Yeah, so our theme was Amanda Gorman's poem from the inauguration, The Hill We Climb, and Black History Month. So, I mean, all the way, we had a winner that was 5 years old. We had a winner that was, 23 years old. And it was beautiful. It was heartfelt. It was inspiring. Um, it was, some of it was very political or personal. The personal is political and the political is personal. But anyway, it was just really great. And we had an awards ceremony, and we had our leaders speak, and hand out awards and certificates. And we had it on display in the front window of Finders Keepers. And we had our event in the parking lot because, again, we're trying to be very COVID safe. And so kids and their families came. We had free music by the wonderful Dia Scott, who sometimes performs in downtown Decatur, and it was just really nice and really fun. And you could tell those kids just, they're used to maybe getting a ribbon, but like to really have a full ceremony. And I'm not saying there aren't people that do this, but we really enjoyed it a lot and hope that, it'll inspire them to continue on their artistic journey.
Yes, I'm all for it. I wish that it could have been on a different date so that I could have attended. But I think I had like 4 things at that specific time, and you were not chosen. I'm so sorry.
Well, and we were just thrilled that the weather cooperated. You know how that is these days.
Oh, yes, yes, yes. But I see in the future, that this kind of an event is necessary and a beautiful thing. And
Yeah, we had a Juneteenth event too that was Nisheena Smith's idea on Juneteenth in Avondale at the art lot.
I was just going to say, I went to that.
Oh, yeah.
That was wonderful.
And we had kids drawing, and we had voter registration. We did a lot of voter registration stuff this fall too, and voter support and redirecting people from closed polls. And because, and look what we did. I'm not saying we, I'm saying we, state of Georgia.
The collective, yes. Yes, there's a movement. And what's so good to me is to be able to let people understand that the group that is trying to suppress the vote is smaller than all of us who believe that we are one. Mm-hmm. And when I ask people to come on this show, I specifically ask them what their initiative was. Why are you doing this? And just to highlight that one little sense of disgust that we all saw took you to a different path, and a group of leaders that said, well, we're going to do this. You had no plan. This was not an organized type thing, but you stood up and got started. And others will take over. But for the moment, this is really, really necessary. And thank you so much. I would like you to talk a little bit about Nisheena. I know she's not here, and some of the other members of your group in terms of organization. How do you organize your teams or your groups? And how do you come to a decision about where you're going next?
Well,
do you have a 501c3? Can you collect donations? And
we do not have a 501c3. We have not had time or energy to do that yet. Like I said, we've had a little bit of turnover in leadership, but we're basically operating as a collective, although, I'm a little bossy sometimes because I used to be a project manager and I'm very opinionated, so I have to watch that. But we really meet twice a month, and we all talk about what's going on and what ideas we have. And then the members, we had them do surveys when they became official members of what things they were interested in doing. And some people have just were like, we have a saying, if it doesn't come to leadership, you can do whatever you want, but it's not AARJ unless it comes to leadership and we approve it. So, for example, one leader at the time wanted to go see about getting a lock off a gate removed that was between Avondale and the museum school as a welcoming gesture, and as a don't be insular kind of thing. And it really wasn't necessary. It had been there from a long time ago when apparently there was some crime in some apartments on the other side or whatever. And they got that done, but we know, like I said, that we want to do education. So we've done things like Nisheena. Okay, so we had leaders of some groups. For example, Nisheena does engagement with the business owners and we've gotten a couple of businesses that are super supportive, like Alan at Edwin Jarvis, which is a co-work and a copying and that printing kind of thing. And then Finders Keepers, which gave us the space for the art show, and Good Karma, which unfortunately went out of business. But yeah, I know it's a bummer. And we also try to support Black-owned businesses or people of color-owned businesses and women-owned businesses. So we put that out to the group. But Nisheena is also the coordinator with reaching out to Ted Terry and our state legislators and
representatives
and that sort of thing. And we were trying to reach out more to some other groups that we've had a little difficulty connecting with, like some more activism groups. And we're really young. We just started in June, and I'm really proud of all we've accomplished, but we're still really figuring it out, And then, Candace was really involved in and on a team with a leader that's now not with us anymore that was doing a lot of election stuff. But really, to be honest, most of our leaders pitch in with everything, but there'll be somebody that's kind of the point person for that. We had another leader that's not a leader with us anymore, an AARJ member and she and Carol were kind of more over the policing, and I was over the policing some too. So we're a little fluid because we're new, and also because, our membership, the one thing I'm concerned about is that I feel like our membership may, in the pandemic, we're all tending to retreat a lot more and be a little more emotionally overwhelmed. As you know, I'm a therapist, so I deal with people all the time. And so I think our energy has been drained, and then there have been a lot of stressors over the last number of years. So I kind of worry a little bit that some people, it's hard to keep people involved because there's so many things, like just even the number of emails I get every day from all the activist organizations that I'm theoretically wanting to support, but I only have so much time and energy that I can't even read all the emails, And so we have an email newsletter that goes out and a Facebook page. But sometimes people are really good if we just put out this thing is really important. Who wants to help? Like we got some volunteers and a real team that formed around the election, but now it's kind of disbanded. So it's that kind of forming and dissolving. And I'm hoping that people aren't going back into their white complacency, because as people of color know, that's a pattern for years, that when really atrocious things happen, people get energized and then they go back into being complacent, or so I'm told.
Well,
I don't think I mentioned Sarah Galatioto Ruff. She's our absolutely fantastic, because she's so helpful with compiling our newsletter and our social media and our Instagram page and all of that stuff. And she's really young. Well, younger than me. I call everybody young that's under 40 now, But, like she's turned me on to Google Forms and things like that I didn't know anything about. So, yes.
Well,
And then Connie Bryans is kind of really into, like, she's part of the Welcoming Avondale group that Avondale formed, which we think is really parallel with what we're trying to do to make Avondale be more welcoming, appear more welcoming, and all of that. And she does a lot of, like I said, we all kind of jump in on whatever we're working on. And we're still, we knew we wanted to do the art show. And then, like I said, we've also got educational groups going on. Like we went through, I think it was for most people about an 8-week group for the Racial Healing Workbook by Dr. Annalise Singh, who used to live in Avondale. And yeah, she was part of AARJ, and she did a kind of Zoom training presentation for us. And then we had 3 different groups studying it for 8 weeks. We had a book group about So You Want to Talk About Race, and we're getting ready to do another, like we've learned about a lot of different resources, like the I think it's called the Anti-Racist Table. I'm forgetting at the moment, but there's so many things like Showing Up for Racial Justice has a power and privilege training, and then we'd like to show the film Restorative Justice. So we got a lot of stuff we want to do.
I think you explained it so beautifully when you said you rise up, various people come to the fore to take over this leadership, and then they back off. We have a name for that. It's called the wild goose effect. Because when geese fly, if you've ever watched them in formation, they change leadership. Nobody has to be at the lead for the whole.
And that's a wonderful thing, because they do that to save them from being exhausted. Like one will be on the lead because that's the hardest for the geese because of the wind, and then they'll drop back and get a little rest and can ride some of the tailwinds of some of the others. So yeah, I think even people that stay on leadership, we ebb and flow how we have energy, because otherwise you're going to burn out, right?
You're going to burn out, and you're not going to have the energy to take what really needs. That's why low tides are very beneficial. When you have to have in your life spiritually, I think, low tide events where you just sit back and you know your boundaries, and if someone doesn't take over, that's okay. But you have to restore yourself before you can be just to someone else. So this was a very important conversation for people who are activists to really think about.
That's true. You put that beautifully. Like, I think you have to restore your soul, and it's not easy trying to change systems or yourself, right?
It isn't. And, when I think of all of the difficulty that African American women, especially, have had to go through without any help, I mean, literally without any help, they never got a low tide.
Right.
But if we're going to be in it for the long run, we have to come back, keep our centers, keep our centers at the center. And also, how wonderful you're a counselor, that so that you can attend to the people in your group too, because many of them will just continue until they fall short. And that's another issue for a lot of us is we need to take time for ourselves, and many times we have to tell each other, I'll pick up this burden, you go take a rest.
Yeah. Well, our 2 African American women leaders both have children too, so And Sarah's getting ready to have twins.
Oh my.
So Carol and Connie and I, and we do find that, we're older and we don't have any children to be taken care of right now. So, we have energy to do some things that maybe they don't, although they've done wonderful work. I mean, Nisheena, got Carla Drenner involved and ended up getting her writing an email and coming to and telling the TV stations that she was coming to our protest and what it was about. And we had TV coverage because of Nisheena and Carla to one of our protests, which was cool to get the word out, because I think the other piece I want to say is that even when all we do is stand out there with Black Lives Matter signs or signs for progressive politicians, like Warnock and Ossoff and Blackman, who unfortunately didn't win, but especially the Black Lives Matter signs. And we had some beautiful artwork signs that we got too that were of like George Floyd and like that. People of color that go by just honk and wave and are happy to see these white people, being supportive. And I'm not saying we're all white people out there, but especially in a town that has, like every town in this country, some racist history. It's just like, you're supporting me, and I think that matters even just on that level, right?
It does.
But you were talking about resting too, and that is a white privilege a lot of time that we have enough money and
Yeah,
can pay for a gardener or whatever more so than the economic disparities because of race in this country, and I'm real aware of that. I took a anti-racism training class that was super intensive with Patty Dye, who's out of state, but has a really good one that's online. And she tells the story that when she was early on doing anti-racist work, and she's been doing this like 30 years, that one of her black cohort got really mad at her because she said, "I'm exhausted. I need to take a break." And she's like, "I don't get a break. I don't get a break. Excuse me, blankety blank. This blankety blank stuff happens every day,
yeah, that's right.
And that's the truth."
Yeah, I don't get a break. We I want you to talk a little bit more about low tide and getting a break and what the challenges are for getting back into it. Because for all of us that have had such privilege, it's like learning a new skill and that you don't like. I don't know about you, but I've been doing activism my whole life. But every time I have to get up to do it, I find it to be very exhausting because it's countercultural. And
Right.
I remember we just did this beautiful, we planted 16,000 flags at the First Christian Church of Decatur. And whenever I'm at a black church and I have to wear a mask, I mean, a white church, and I have to wear a mask, I put on my Black Lives Matter mask.
Mm-hmm.
And we had all kinds of television coverage. So my friends in Fayetteville were furious. One of them called me and said, "What were you doing with that Black Lives Matter commie mask on? Don't be wearing that when you're on." Now, these are friends of mine, so they can say that. But they really mean it. They really mean it. And the more we talk about what these issues are, and I think I do it specifically to put a stick in the beehive and disrupt them so that we can talk about it, but it drains me.
Yeah.
I get drained. So, what are your suggestions for activists who are kind of new to this and, they want to take a break, but like that other woman said, we don't get a break.
Right.
Toughen up.
I'm going to answer that, but I haven't been paying attention to the chat. I see we have a social media question, so let's do that after I answer that.
Oh, okay.
Um, I mean, just as a therapist, I think that, we need to remember this is a marathon. It's not a sprint, and it's going to go multiple generations. I mean, look at all the freedom movements in this country, like the first wave of suffragettes, they didn't even see the results of what they were fighting for, right? So,
Well, that's true.
I think people have to do things to feed their soul, but also push their limits a little bit, to try and make change. And only you can figure out what's too much for you, like at least I'm a big extrovert, which helps, but for introverts it's really exhausting, and there's a lot of things you can do behind the scenes. Find a niche that's not quite so hard for you. Everybody doesn't have to be out on the street. Be behind the scenes checking voter rolls and sending postcards. Find something that's helpful, that suits you and your personality, and do stuff to feed your soul every day or every week. Like, even if it's just taking a walk outside, I think that saved my sanity a
Feed yourself.
lot during the pandemic. But the other part is, to be honest, doing this during the pandemic has been great because at least it gives me a sense of meaning. I mean, I have meaning because I have other sources of meaning, but, you know, this has been meaningful to me, in addition to helping people as a therapist and all these other things I do.
I also would like you to talk about how much is too much. Um, people who have get very excited about something that is activism, and they step forward and then get themselves in a lot of trouble that they were not expecting.
Well, what do you mean by that?
I'm thinking of my friend who was at a protest in uh, Columbus, Georgia, at the School of the Americas, and she ended up in prison for 6 months.
Oh, wow.
And one of the problems for her was she's very much an activist and wanted to make the statement. So she knew that this might happen, didn't know it would. But when she came back, the result of that activism meant that she lost her pension
Mm,
because she was a teacher. And I think that one of the things that we all have to be cognizant of is it's not just necessarily carrying a sign. It also could be someone who inadvertently puts you in a position where you might have consequences you didn't plan on.
right.
You have a support system that will take care of you. She luckily has a great support system, but no pension.
Wow. Yeah,
So I think that's an issue. Can we all support each other
right.
as we move through all of this?
You
And
know,
how far does
I
that
mean,
go?
I know, for example, there's therapists that are volunteering to give low fee therapy to activists that have been, you know, treated a little brutally by police during Black Lives Matter demonstrations.
Wonderful.
Um, so, yeah, I mean, it's real. I mean, and I mean, it's not all fair. I mean, the way that innocent people are killed or beaten by some police. And again, I want to be clear. Um, I am not an anti police person. I'm not saying that the structure doesn't need to be really revamped. And I know some people don't think that's possible. I don't know the answer to that, but I know, I'm not saying I'm anti police, all police are bad, but the system puts them in a situation, and then the racism on top of it and the unconscious bias creates these terrible situations that are deadly for Black people, particularly. So the question on the social media was, what are our views on the proposed legislation on how Blacks should behave when stopped by police? I have to claim ignorance. I don't know about the proposed legislation about how Blacks should behave when stopped by police, but I'm assuming it's probably, I don't know, but how on earth are you going to get that message out to people if it was passed? So it's probably not a great idea. I would say that, the police need to be really careful about excessive use of force. So I don't know. Do you know about that legislation?
I don't, but I will look into it.
Yeah.
I think that blacks should behave like whites.
And be treated the
Be
same.
treated the same. And, for all, look at, I'm thinking of Sandra, um, Sandra Bland, and how she was treated. I mean, she was very respectful. There was nothing wrong with her demeanor. She followed through with everything, and he just went. I mean,
Well, look at that kid that they pepper sprayed in school. That's a whole nother issue. This whole
oh,
security guards in school. I mean, oh my gosh,
I know,
9 years old.
9 years old. And there should
No,
be.
we don't need the criminalization of children, and we've certainly been doing that, and especially children of color.
One of the problems that I have that with the Atlanta public schools is they spent $11 million to create a police force in the school and all of the system, and they took out all the counselors and gave the police, quote unquote, training and counseling.
Those are two completely diametrically opposed positions. Oh my gosh.
It is. And how did this develop? It's like a virus. When we talk about policing, why are there police in schools?
Right.
Why are they there in the first place?
Well, I mean, and the problem is so much bigger than schools, even. I mean,
Yes.
in my opinion, we don't really support families. We don't really support children. We don't support the elderly. And, if you're having a lot of problems and, you know, we, it's just terrible when people, have to live in cars. And I'm an addiction counselor and a trauma counselor, among other things. There's just so many problems at so many levels in our society. And I'm not saying that some children aren't violent, but and that teachers certainly aren't equipped to deal with them. But by and large, you know, our whole society needs to become more supportive instead of just trying to lock everybody up.
I think one of the things you're doing, which is so important, is that you started with an issue. You did something that brought everybody that was thinking about it to the forum. You have created a whole cadre of educational forums that helps others understand what our ancestors did to other people. And once you have knowledge and once you have understanding and the connections are made from the heart to the head, you can't go back. You can't go backwards to the way you were. And you can also stand in front of someone else and let them know that you can't go there because this is an issue of humanity.
One of the things you said was from the heart, and I think that's really important. I study and teach nonviolent communication, and it's about trying to really understand with empathy the other person's worldview and have them understand yours with empathy. And I'm not saying I'm a master of it at all, but the intention at least. So the problem is we get caught in our views and start arguing over views instead of trying to figure out how to meet everybody's needs. And I'm not saying every need is going to be met. We're not in nirvana, but when you're in these silos of reality and information media, it can get hard to get past those concepts into the heart. And I
Yes,
think that's important.
I do too. I do too. And this is what you did with your art show.
Hmm.
You brought people to the heart of art brings people to the heart of what an issue is.
Hmm.
And you know, there are a lot of favorites I have, but I don't know who drew the picture of this mountain with a stream of people
Yeah.
in the middle of the mountain, wrapping around it, walking forward.
Yes.
Oh, I just, you know, that is exactly who I think we are.
There was, and the thing about the mountain was it said, like, underneath the soil was like racism and discrimination and all these things. And then there were the names of the activists at the top that were like, uh, that had, gone through history, and then people walking on top of that. I thought that was
Oh
really,
my goodness.
really beautiful.
Yes, and you know, some of them I think could be made into this stationery and paper, and it could be sold.
I'm glad you said that, because we are contemplating as one of our next projects. We got the children to agree we could use their art for a fundraiser, and we would maybe um, consider doing like an 18-month calendar and
Oh,
having their art on a calendar. You're ready.
that one. Yep.
Originally it was going to be 12 months, but then we gave out more winners, so we're going to have to do an 18-month calendar.
Well, this has just been very exciting. I've had some wonderful African American activists on that just blew my mind away. And I decided a while ago that I really wanted to interview people that were investing in the culture of the area. And Lisa Tur, I don't know how you say her name. Is
Me?
one. Oh, that's you?
Now, who did you say? What did you say?
It's Lisa, two Lisas.
Oh, it's me. It's a pseudonym. Don't give it away.
I can't even
I
say it.
have a pseudonym because I don't want my clients to find everything I do on Facebook.
Well, isn't that wonderful?
Yes.
Okay, well, isn't that, and you would have to ask the leadership. So anyway, I was really impressed with uh, Avondale as a community. You know, I've lived in a lot of communities, but they're all white, and they're you know, there's a chasm. If I wanted to deal with African Americans, I would have to drive to another side of town and just be with them. But I could never invite them over or be with them or talk about their issues. I remember the first time I had an experience with was one of my
Why,
friends was a
why,
visiting nurse.
why couldn't you invite them over? Was it segregated?
Well, no, it was unconsciously segregated.
Hmm.
You know, um, this kind of a thing. Or you see people picking their purse up and holding it and
Hmm.
taking their kids under their arm. But anyway, my friend is a visiting nurse, and she went into this community that was no more than 10 miles away, and it was an African American community, and she was taking care of, you're right, she was taking care of issues with this parent and child. The baby was probably 1. So she comes in and sits down at the table with the mother and begins talking about childcare and nutrition. And the baby climbs up on her lap, puts his hands on her face, and starts feeling her hair. She was the first white person that child or that community had ever seen.
Hmm.
And I went with her on many occasions, and it was the same. It's like we live in different countries. We're in the same country, but we live in alternative universes.
There's still too much segregation. I mean, even though it's not illegal, too much separation.
Too much separation. And so I really appreciate what you're doing. And I hope all of this is going to bring us together, because not for us, but for the children in the future.
Thank you so much for having me.
Well,
Having your interest in AARJ and being a part of it.
Right. And I love your own symbol.
3 multicolored fists.
Where did you get that?
I think that Sarah and Shelton designed it.
Please tell everyone on your team that they are very much appreciated, and that this interview will be put online so they can listen to it. And I hope that you will all think of WCEG as a tool or a space or a place for you to get that message out, and also for me to keep continuing to tell all the wonderful things that you're doing.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Yes. Now we are already on YouTube, and we are archived. Right. So people can just pick this up from there, and we can send it around also. So I've been talking to Lisa Cattrell. Thank you so much. And she is one of the organizers of the Avondale Alliance for Racial Justice. You can find her on her Facebook page. And also, how would they join your organization?
If they go to our webpage, aa-rj.org, you can click on Become a Member, and you can also sign our petitions.
Oh, yes. And we want to support Lisa and your community and all who are working to change the tone of the South. So I'm signing off. Thank you very much. My name is Rev Diane Dougherty, and you are listening to Take a Stand. Have a wonderful day and a wonderful week. Thank you all.
Thank you.